Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 142 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today, I'm really excited to, at the end of the video, of course, we've got a mod that's been 2 years in the making. I covered the first version of this mod all the way back in part 20, back in 2021, and now NDP has finally updated his woolly mammoth, and it's like the most incredible thing I've ever seen, and I'll show you. But we've got, and I've got to keep it to the end because I've got something to encourage you to watch the whole video. But we're going to be starting off today. We've got some really cool living animals though, and an extinct one too, as well as the mammoth. So we've got two extinct animals today. We're going to start off with Lorby, who's made a leopard tortoise, which I am fully in love with. So leopard turtles, or leopard tortoise, Stigmochelys paradis. These guys are large and very attractively marked turtle found in the savannas of eastern and southern Africa. So a little bit in their taxonomy, they're originally considered in the genus Gelonidae, which is like other turtles, but now they've been put in their own genus called Stigmochelys, which means mark point tortoise. So it basically means the marked tortoise. And the species name pallidus means kind of leopard because it looks like leopard-like spots across its shell. Hence where they get the name the leopard tortoise. They're really cool animals. So these guys are really interesting. They're actually the fourth largest species of turtle in the world, or tortoise in the world. So the order it goes is the Galapagos tortoises, Aldabras, sulcata tortoises, also from Africa, but a little bit more north. And these guys are from a little bit more of southern Africa, and they are the fourth largest. So typically adults reach about 40 centimeters or 16 inches in length and weigh about 13 kilograms. The adults tend to be larger in the northern and southern parts of their range, and typical specimens can be up to 20 kilograms or 44 pounds, and some exceptional individuals may get up to 70 kilograms and up to 70 centimeters, 28 inches, and 40 kilograms, about 88 pounds. So you can see as well, their carapace is quite high and domed, and with almost vertical stripes, and juveniles and young adults, as we can see here, we'll have a look at little babies, are often marked with black blotches and datches across their yellow background. And I've worked with I've worked with leopard tortoises, quite cool little guys. But in mature adults, they tend to become a non-strip down or grey, and the head is usually a uniform tan color or something. So these guys are quite widely distributed across eastern and southern Africa. So they extend from South Sudan to Somalia, across East Africa to South Africa and Namibia, and they're generally absent from humid forests of Central Africa. But over their range, they actually occupy the most varied habitats of all tortoises, and they include grasslands, thorn scrubs, like bushlands and savannas, and even can be found at altitudes from sea level to about 9,500 feet or about 2,900 meters. That's really cool. So in terms of their diet, like most species of tortoises really, they are herbivores. So their diets consist of a wide variety of forbs, thistles, grasses, and succulents. And they consume berries and other fruits when that's available. And they will even sometimes gnaw on ash or bones or even hyena feces to get calcium, which is necessary for bone development and developing eggs. And seeds can also pass undigested through the guts, so they play a significant role in seed dispersal across their habitat, which is really interesting. And normally active during the day, they will be less active during hot weather during the dry season, and they typically will use abandoned burrows of aardvarks and foxes and things like that. And jackals, they will usually dwell in them and use them to kind of get out of really hot or cold weather. It creates a little microclimate for them to live in. So sexual maturity for leopard tortoise is about 12 to 15 years old, and they may live for up to 80 to 100 years. And during the mating season, males will fight over females by ramming and butting their competitors, and then they tail the female for a distance and then ram into her and ram her into submission. And when mating, if you've heard turtles mating, it's like a very weird sound. But yeah, really interesting. So typically nesting, we'll have a look at the babies while we'll talk about nesting. So nesting will typically occur around May and October, where the female will dig a hole and lay a clutch of 5 to 30 eggs, and she may lay as many as 5 to 7 clutches in a single season. And there are numerous predators that'll eat the young hatchlings that include monitor lizards, snakes, jackals, and crows. But adults have few natural predators, but they have occasionally been reported being preyed upon by lions and hyenas. But generally, adults, not too much of a worry for them. Things going on. So we'll talk about their conservation. So in terms of their conservation, they are widespread species and considered least concern, though human activities such as agricultural burning, consumption, and even exporting them for the pet trade are potential threats, but that's not really a cause for concern. And they are also incredibly easy to captive breed, so they've been mostly doing well. So most tortoises have been originated from captive breeding programs have been come from Kenya and Tanzania. So they're basically not collected from the wild anymore, so that's a good thing. And they're listed as Appendix 1, so and also it's banned to they're banned to import in the United States because of risk of heart water, which is an infective disease that can carried by tortoise ticks that can be quite a worry for the US livestock industry. So can't import them, but luckily there's plenty of people breeding them in captivity, so they're doing quite well in there. So yeah, really awesome mod done by Lorby, and definitely love them. So now we're gonna have a look at go back to the Triassic. Really interesting animal here. So this is the Portuguese Metoposaurus. So this is one of the species. So as we'll get into, this was done by Schmeck, TNT, and Leaf, so a little bit of a collaborative effort. So Metoposaurus means front lizard, and they're an extinct genus of septospondyle, temtospondyle amphibians, quite a big amphibian, known from the late Jurassic of Germany, Italy, Poland, and Portugal. And you can see they're mostly aquatic, with small limbs, large teeth, quite a large flat head, and quite a flattened tail as well. So this is believed to be very similar to like a crocodile in kind of ecology. They would have fed mainly on fish with their needle-like teeth and wide jaws. And there's been many actually mass graves of them found, probably due to creatures being grouped together in drying pools during droughts. And these are amphibians, so they need water to breed, but also potentially to keep their skin moist and things like that. So they were first discovered in 1842 by von Meyer, who found the skull roof of this guy in, I think, Germany. And many had tried to kind of reconstruct it as the same specimen and named it Meptodus diagnostis. However, it was renamed to Meptosaurus diagnostics. And there's a few species actually described. So this one here that's depicted is the largest one. So this is the most recent one as well. It's described in 2015 and is Meptosaurus algravensis. This comes from the late Jurassic of Portugal and has a much broader skull than other species, and it was named by Stephen Buscetti, Richard Butler, Octavio Maturis, and Sebastian Sater, and is the largest one. It has estimated mandible length of about 65 centimeters, or about 27 inches, so it is a bigger one, but there's a mention there are a couple other species that have been described. So in terms of its skull, you can see it's got a very flat skull, very much probably well adapted for eating attacking things more like a crocodile, or maybe eating smaller things like that. Very wide skull. In terms of geography, so they're known from the early Jurassic of Germany and Australia, and there has been some thoughts of them found in Madagascar and China, but they're most abundant kind of in, Europe. So that may be different genera. Among streptospondals, these guys were actually one of the latest survivors. However, there were some that arrived into the Jurassic, even like Coolosuchus was a streptospondal that survived into mid-Cretaceous Australia, which is quite interesting. So these guys were kind of like the last of the temtospondals, which used to be much more common during the Permian and kind of fell off during the Jurassic. These guys were kind of some of the last ones and then kind of went extinct around with the extinction of Coolosuchus. Yeah, we'll have a look at you swimming. Look at these cool guys. So locomotion, it seems there's been lots of research into actually their locomotion in their bodies. As you can see, they've also got the high up eyes, so they can look over and ambush prey, very much like crocodiles. So they're very much like crocodiles in like a lot of ways. And also their certificate and thoracic vertebrae were also like fully ossified, which was interesting. And posterior was flat. And they actually have the trunk that is quite similar to that of ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. So there's lots of aquatic adaptations to suggest these guys were semi-aquatic, which is quite interesting. So looking at the limbs and the vertebral column suggests these guys would have made limb movements similar to plesiosaurs. But a recent study suggests that these guys actually may have also swam in like lakes during the wet season and used their heads and forearms to burrow into the ground during the dry season. So when it was dry, very much like a lot of amphibians would do today, they would dig a burrow so they could, dig into that moist soil and keep their skin moist and protect themselves. They also have been found to have medullary region that was filled with tracheal bone. So these guys would have pretty much had highly vascularized bone growth, so they had very arrested lines of growth, which means these guys probably had to deal with some pretty harsh dry seasons, and then would grow when everything was, much nicer for them in the wet season, since these guys are amphibians. And in terms of what it was living with, there hasn't been any evidence of predators, but it was living with phytosaurs, so that could be potentially competition or even a predator, and found in bone beds, which is quite interesting. So there's a lot of interesting species. In terms of Jurassic, there were like early dinosaurs, dicynodonts, lots of really cool, interesting early therapsids to eat. So it was definitely probably attacking larger prey and many large fish. I imagine very much like crocodiles today, they just eat whatever they get their mouths around. And then we can see the cute little baby here with your axolotl kind of, you know, little axolotl gills. Looks really, really cool. Definitely a big fan of this guy. So yeah, really, really awesome. So another great mod. Thank you, Leaf, TNT, and Smrex for making that. So next up, we've got a Great Cakes mod and Leaf mod. So this is kind of a remake of one of his older mods. Great Cakes mod took it upon themselves to sort it. So here we've got the Vulturine Guineafowl. So these guys are actually the largest living species of Guineafowl, and the only distantly related to other Guineafowl, which is the closest living relative is even the breasted Guineafowl, lives in Central Africa. So they're a member of the bird Numididae and the only member of the genus Acroleum, and a resident breeder in northern East Africa, from southern Ethiopia down into Tanzania and through Kenya. So these guys are quite a large bird. They get to about 61 to 71 centimeters, or about 24 to 28 inches, with a round body and a small head that has a longer wing, neck, and legs than pretty much any other guinea fowl. The adults, as you can see here, pretty much have a bare neck, unlike a lot of other guinea fowl, and have unfeathered heads, other than this little bit here. So this has kind of led to the name the Vulturine guinea fowl, because they kind of look like they've got the bare head of a vulture. Also, as well, they've got quite a slim neck, which projects into a cape of like long, glossy, round, glossy blue and white hackles there, and also some blue covert feathers as well, or cobalt feathers along the plumage. And their wings are short and rounded, but they do have a longer tail than other guinea fowl. And the sexes are typically pretty similar, although the females are usually slightly smaller than the males and have smaller spurs, usually because males use them to fight. And they also, young birds are mainly, you can see here, grey-brown with like a duller blue breast and like short hankles as well. You can see that there. Yeah, really interesting. Really cool, guys. I really love this design of these really weird guinea fowls. They're really interesting animals. It's amazing what evolution comes up with. But yeah, in terms of their diets and behavior, these guys are gregarious species, so they form flocks outside the breeding season of up to 25 individuals. And they typically feed on seeds and all sorts of small invertebrates, very similar to other guinea fowl. They're also terrestrial and will run rather than fly when alarmed. And despite the open habitat, they tend to cover and roost in trees, and they make a chink, chink, chink sound. And typically they like to breed on open and dry habitats with scattered bushes and trees, such as savannas, and usually lay between 4 to 8 creamy blue eggs in a well-hidden like grass scrape. And then these little guys come out and then grow up and fledge and then become adult guinea fowl. So yeah, really, really cool. Another really awesome mod. We do love some Great Cakes mod here. So next up, we've got another remaster. We've got the by Norwalu, who's like really touches up, but also done by Leaf and Nick. We have got the Nubian Ibex. Really, really awesome mod here. So the Nubian ibex is actually a desert-dwelling goat species from the genus Capra that is found around northern and northeastern Africa to the Middle East. It was originally considered a subspecies of the northern alpine ibex, but is now considered its own distinct species. So they're actually the smallest species of ibex, which is really weird. So they grow to about 65 to 75 centimeters, or about 26 to 30 inches tall, at the shoulder, and it's sexually dimorphic, with males being significantly larger than the females. So males are on average between 52 and 74 kilograms, 115 to 165 pounds, with females being about 25 to 32 kilograms, about 56 to 72 pounds. So you can see they're quite a light tan color with a light underbelly, and males also have like a dark brown mane, as you can kind of see there, and a little bit of a goatee. And males begin growing this little tuft and beard at about 3 years of age, and then continues to develop. And then also during the breeding season, the males will grow into a rutting fur. So this actually is a variant within the game, but I obviously didn't get it. So it's kind of like a dark color. They go very, very dark brown with as well. And they appear in October in 3 to 4 year old males, but then may appear in early July and August in older males. However, not all males will actually develop this rutting fur as they grow up. And you can see the female here. So they have quite long horns, as you can see. They have quite long, thin horns that extend up and then backwards. So look at the females. So the males, they can reach about a meter long, or about 39 inches. And females, they really exceed 30 centimeters, so about 12 inches. And males' horns are typically much thicker, as you can see here, than the females. And they kind of curve back. And male horns will actually grow large bulges, as you can see going on there, kind of like the rings that prevent them from getting stuck together when they're locked in combat. So typically, the growth for the horns will plateau about 7 to 8 years of age, while females will be about 4 to 6. And there's a significant relationship between the age of the individual and the number of horn ridges they've got. So let's have a look at the male again. Let's see, look at you over there. So, in terms of their distribution, historically they were found all across the northern Middle East and northeastern Africa. So they can be found in kind of like Jordan, Oman, Israel, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, and Sudan. They're extirpated from Lebanon, though there's actually breeding programs that are breeding them in captivity and releasing them underway. Also been extirpated from Syria, and it's unknown if they live in Ethiopia and Eritrea and Yemen, which is interesting. So in terms of their habitats, they tend to like living in rough mountainous terrain where they eat grasses and leaves, especially from acacia trees. They forage on the ground and may rear up to kind of grab things. They also climb trees when feeding. They reduce feeding on plants with strong defenses like thorns, and preferred plants vary depending on the dry season and wet seasons and things like that, so they try to find where they can get them out around. And they prefer spaces with closed cliff to get away from predators. As well, and they're typically preyed upon by quite a few different animals. So they're preyed upon by Arabian leopards, Arabian wolves, golden jackals, red foxes, eagles, and bearded vultures. And when attacked, they emit a call and also share their habitat with lots of herbivores like hyraxes, Arabian aurochs, gazelles, and wild asses. And they also have a mutualistic relationship with the tinsman starling that eats the parasites off their skin, which is quite interesting. So in terms of their behavior, these guys, in terms of social behavior, they are social, with herds consisting of females, young, and males up to about 3 years of age. Then herds are typically up to 20 individuals, but can reach as high as 50. Female herds are actually often comprised of female individuals that have a dominance hierarchy, and then the males are typically solitary or form small kind of bands of about 8 individuals. And during the breeding season, males will join a female-based herd of about 6 to 8 in rut, and then large males will do the battle, with their horns. In terms of their movement, they are diurnal, and they're active during the day and rest at night. And like other ones, they tend to spend much of their time on cliffs, which is safer for them by predators, and can leap and jump quite well to get to traverse these areas as well. And they also will make kind of repeated movements through the landscape that creates like trails that they follow. And they migrate throughout the year, so they navigate between patches of food. And additionally, sometimes even cold winter days have been known to sit in the sun to warm up. And they've also been known to dig into shallow depressions, and the shallow digs actually creates little habitats for seeds to germinate, so they're quite important in their little ecosystem. So in terms of their reproduction, and as we talk about the reproduction, let's talk about the cute little bebés, little cutie here. So gestation or mating will typically begin from October to November, with a dominant male pursuing several females, and then he'll kind of smell the anal region of the female, with the lips curled up like a phlegm in response. Males typically reach breeding maturity about 2 years of age, but may not be allowed to breed until they're 5, when they're big and strong enough to fight males. Females can breed at about as young as 6 months, but don't typically breed until about 1 to 3. And some suggest that these guys have developed a second mating season in the spring in response to hyper-arid climates. Typically, gestation is about 5 months, and litters of about 1 to 2 kids are typically born between March and July, although the majority of births are kind of within the 3 to 4 week period between late March and April. Females leave the herd and give birth in a secluded area, and newborns can stand within 15 minutes and can nurse within 2 hours of being born. And the mother will then rejoin the herd in a few days, and then rejoin other mothers for several weeks. And then leaving kids in a sheltered creche allows mothers to seek out richer pastures of food that are farther from the cliffs. and then compared to the mothers that keep their kids with them. They're typically weaned after their mother's teat at about 4 months old, and females reach maturity at about 3 to 4, and while males reach at about 6 years of age. So females 3 to 4, males 6, and they can live up to 12 years in the wild and up to 18 in captivity. So quite long-lived for a goat. So the first fossil evidence we have of Nubian ibex back in Israel is actually about 150,000 years ago. And in spite of the growing presence of livestock during the last 10,000 years, they've actually remained pretty present throughout this time. And they seem to maybe have increased a little bit during the late Holocene, which is interesting. So it's been a little bit of look into how they're related to other species of like capra. And they seem to be a monophyletic group with the Siberian ibex, so they seem to be closely related to them. And there's been lots of research into looking in them. And also adaptations for the desert. They have mutations that allow them to better digest food and find better metabolites, better immune responses. Protein. There's also skin barriers to help radiation, protect from radiation. So it's quite interesting. They've got interesting adaptations. And then we can look at their genetics to see how they've adapted to the desert. So in terms of their physiology, they're actually they're adapted really well adapted for the terrain. So they have, you can see those long eyes, like the horizontal pupil. It allows them to see when they're going down. They also have a tassel lucidum that allows them to give them night vision and things like that. Also, they've got the blood composition that is actually they can balance it through reabsorbing large amounts of urea, and this actually slows their metabolism, and because of the only poor quality that's available. And also higher hemoglobin, red blood counts allows them to take in more oxygen, things like that, which is really cool. So in terms of their conservation, they are considered vulnerable because there's less than 10,000 mature individuals, and their population is believed to be declining. And this is believed to be because of competition with livestock for food and water, hunting pressures, habitat fragmentation, and destruction. And things like outdoor recreation, ecotourism have been issues with these guys for disturbing them as they seek out water systems with low human presence and kind of want to avoid people as much as possible. But conversely, some ibex have actually been habituated to people and kind of get more used to them. But they will get used to people and seek out food, seek out towns to look for food. So it just depends on the population. But as 2020, they seem to be doing okay. So most places in Egypt, there's probably about a little over 1,000. Israel and Palestine, there's about 1,400. So there's lots of evidence to protect them and really re-release them as well. That's quite cool. And a lot of religions and things like that actually consider them, mention them. So it's quite important for that part of the history because they always see a lot of these ibexes. And also ecotourism, they're quite prominent. So people want to come and see the ibex and be able to view them because they're really cool animals. So how can you not love these wonderful ibex, especially the Nubian? So Nawala did a great job remastering this guy. And Leaf and Nick, the original one I've covered before, definitely really, really awesome mod. So we're going to move on now. So the next mod is done by Just That. So Just That did a Grant's Gazelle. So let's have a look at these guys. Let's see if we can find the male. He's over here having a good food. A good feed of food. Good on him. So here we've got the Grant's Gazelle. So these guys are a relatively large gazelle species that are distributed from northern Tanzania to South Sudan and Ethiopia. And which is quite interesting. So they're genetically closely related to the Thompson's and Schomburg's gazelle, being their quite closest relatives. And they show high genetic variation and no isolation between their populations. And this believes to be maybe because they expanded and contracted kind of with the late Pleistocene, where populations were isolated. But they seem to be doing quite well. In terms of their size and like description, they get to about 75 to 95 centimeters or about 37 inches at the shoulder. And the females weigh between 35 to 50 kilograms, about 77 to 110 pounds, and males weigh between 50 to 80 kilograms, or about 110 to 180 pounds. You can see they've got like a beige-orange color to them with a light belly, and they're quite similar to a Thompson's gazelle, except they're much larger, and they've also got these like layer-shaped horns, which is a little bit different. And they actually will have a rump that extends up to the tail, which is not seen on the Thompsons. And there's little subspecies variation, but I'm not sure how actually these subspecies are depicted. I know some people probably consider them, probably lump them together. So these guys are found in a few countries in East Africa that include Ethiopia, Kenya, South Sudan, and Tanzania, where they live in kind of small groups of mid-sized herds of like females, juveniles, and bachelor groups. And during the mating season, males will become territorial and protective over a harem of females to breed with bachelor herds briefly marry, disperse, contentions die down. and they can become quite hormonal. So these guys actually prefer living in like short grassy plains where they can graze, but they also can be found grazing in more sparse arid shrublands where they avoid areas with high nutrient grasses. That means they could be predators. They will also occupy semi-arid areas, relying on more browse and shrubbery, just depending what they can. They also sometimes will be seasonally migratory, following water as well, and they also supplement the water with the leafy material that they eat, so they're able to get water from their food. They also have the same do not take the same routes as other savanna ungulates, kind of like plain zebras, Thompson gazelles, gay buffalo, and white-bearded gnu. These guys are far more susceptible to dehydration, but these guys are a little bit better, so they're a little bit more chill with their migrations. The most common predators for these guys include the cheetah and African wild dogs. And there's also lions, hyenas, and leopards are also forever present. African leopards hunt the gazelle, but they prefer impala. But these guys are mostly prey for cheetah since they're so fast. And even around lakes, they will be Nile crocodiles are a threat to nearly every animal, and also hippos have been known to attack these guys. But typically, main things are predators. So they just be careful about waterfalls, because Nile crocodiles and hippos have been known to attack them as well. But these guys, humans also hunt these gazelles, and they're actually quite popular. In the Serengeti, they are prey item for the cheetah, but the smaller Thompson gazelle is preferred, so that's the preferred one. They are considered what's called gregarious, territorial, and sometimes migratory. So typically the home range of a female will overlap a lot with the males, and when a female's in estrus, they're actually strongly guarded by the dominant male, who prevents other males from mating with them. And any female that tries to leave the group is actually herded back by the male. And the bachelor groups are typically considered, we'll talk about the female after we talk about him. So the male groups, or the bachelor groups, are typically not currently holding territory, just adolescent males or adult males that don't have a territory. However, bachelor groups tend to be loose and members can go wherever they want. Typically, larger, older males have a better chance of establishing a territory, and conflict can be usually solved by imitation displays. But they'll swing their neck from side to side and buck and kind of to show off their strength. But sometimes they will actually kind of fight around. But typically, younger males are more likely to fight than older males. So in terms of their diet, these guys are actually mixed feeders. There you are. So these guys are mixed feeders. So they typically feed on both browse and graze. So typically they feed on 66% browse and 34% graze, but the rainfall is quite dependent on their diet. They also withstand dehydration as like very indigested dry matter. So they try to consume smaller amount of food than domestic animals, but well more adapted for these extreme environments. So they get a lot of their moisture from the plants that they eat, especially like browse. So they eat a little bit more browsers than grazers, but we'll kind of eat both. And in terms of reproduction, these cute little guys, look at you guys over here. These guys are sexually mature at about 18 months old, with territory-holding males typically mate more than bachelor groups. The courtship will follow the male following the female, waiting for her to urinate, and does the Fletchman response to see if she's in estrus. Then it continue to follow her, and then mount her, and also get her pregnant. And the gestation period for the gazelle is about 198 days. And births in the Serengeti will peak between January to February, and a female will then leave her herd, find a well-hidden place to give birth, and after the female is given, she'll eat the afterbirth and then keep the fawn clean and scentless. Females have then recently give birth will actually stay together for protection. The females will nurse their fawns 4 times a day, and fawns are mobile for the first few days, and the mother will stay close by. But when these fawns can walk, they will join the mother in the herd. And around this time, they'll associate with one another in pair groups, and then they're typically weaned off their mother at about 6 months of age, but then will continue associating with their mother until adolescence. So in terms of their threats and conservation, they are still considered quite a common species. I believe they are considered least concern. Yep, they are considered least concern. Still quite a common species, but they have been eradicated in certain areas. Many threats to them are typically poaching and habitat destruction. But their status as an unthreatened species is quite dependent on reserves and national parks where they live, so they've got to be protected. But they likely live in like Serengeti National Park, the Ngorongoro Conservation Area in Tanzania, and Lake Turkana in Kenya. And the population is estimated to be between 140,000 to 350,000. And while they have a stable population, it seems the trend might be going downwards, so may need a little bit more protection, but they're not in dire threat of extinction at the moment, which is a good thing. But yeah, really, really cool animals. How can you not love grunts gazelles? All that, just that, I mean, is definitely done a great job with this guy. I love seeing more mods from more modders, and not just dominated by the first few modders. We like to have a bit of variety and show people showing off their skills and things like that. So, next up, we have got Monsoon, who always makes some wonderful mods. So, we've got Monsoon making the Vishanti, or what was it? Vishan, not Vishanti, Vishan Warty Pig. So, let's have a look at these guys. And I really love how Monsoon has done the hair on this one. Really, really excellent. So, anyway, these guys are a very and critically endangered species of pig, so they're in the genus Sus, and they're from the Vishantian Islands, like Cebu, Negros, Pará, Basati, Cepador, in the central Philippines. And they're known by many names during the region, which means like wild pig, baboy, and house, which means wine pig in areas like forest pig, baboy talun, the dark pig, baboy sulop, and the baboy ramo, which is quite interesting. So in terms of their distribution, they're typically found in 6 islands of the Philippines, as I mentioned, those 6 islands. However, they've been documented remaining populations as that. And it's believed to be extinct on all other islands, so there's potentially some surviving on Masabe. There is 2 different subspecies. There's the Cebu wild pig, which is warty pig that's believed to be extinct, and the Negros warping pig, which is the one that's alive today. There's a small population, and it's believed to be populated. Both populations may have been separated since the Ice Age, about 12,000 years. So there is probably a case they could potentially be lumped. In terms of their physical characteristics, they received their name from the 3 fleshy warts that they have beyond the visions of the boar, and also speculate these warts may be for defense to protect against rivals in fights. So you can see they got lots of kind of warts, quote unquote, and also grow quite stiff, spiky hair, as you can see down the back here, with the kind of like this white bit on their face. And but other than that, they typically don't look too different from other pigs. So in terms of their breeding and diet or behavior, these guys tend to live in groups of up to 4 to 6, with their diets consisting mainly of tubers, roots, and fruits that can be found in the forest. And they may eat cultivated crops, but because about 95% of their habitat has been catered by local farmers, they typically have to eat a lot of cultivated crops because there's simply not enough habitat for them left. And because this land is cleared, it's often unproductive for a few years. The source of these food sources for these pigs can be quite limited, and has led to their dwindling numbers, and that's why they're considered critically endangered. And they're also the first pig species to ever be recovered using tools by digging at a French zoo, so that's quite interesting as well. So let's talk about their reproduction. These are little white ones. These are little, we'll have a look at the normal babies, not the albinos. So these guys have their piglets typically during the dry season, between the months of January to March, in their native habitat in the western Visayan Islands. And that means the mean number of piglets, or the average number of piglets, is between 3 and 4 per litter. And there's actually 1 case of a male-led infanticide documented in captivity, which is a little bit sad. But in terms of conservation, as I mentioned, they are critically endangered. So most of their habitat loss is the biggest kind of driver for these guys. So they're not preyed upon, usually by commercial logging and slash and burn farming, and are extinct in 98% of the original range due to the loss of forest cover. They're also hunted for food, and farmers see them as pests as they damage their crops. And they're also vulnerable to being contaminated genetically because they can hybridize readily with domestic pigs. So that's another big issue for them guys. But luckily there are breeding programs and captive populations all across the world. There's 31 zoos in Europe and quite a few in also the United States. Several zoos have been trying to breed them. So luckily they are protected in captivity, but hopefully there's more conservation work to try and breed them as well. So due to the small number, there's actually not very much known about their behavior, which is a little bit sad, but hopefully we can learn more and develop better conservation projects to help protect these guys, because they're a species that is critically endangered and definitely in need of it. So here's the male, here's the female. Females are not quite so hairy, but so really, really cool. You can see that white stripe on their face there a lot better. Really, really awesome. Monsoon really just makes some wonderful mods. So we're finished with the Visayan Warty Pig. Now we're going to have a look into prehistory. These guys are technically Holocene, but we're going to have a look at probably the most well-known prehistoric animal of all time, up there with T-Rex. And also, what's really cool, this is a mod that's been in the making for 2 years. As I mentioned, I originally covered the original one back in 2021, and Monsoon has been NDP wanted to update it, so it's been 2 years since then, and now we've finally got the woolly mammoth mod. So this is actually incredible. I'm in love with it. This is 100% male, so we'll have a look at this guy. So the woolly mammoth, or Mammothus primogenus, is an extinct species of mammoth that lived during the Middle Pleistocene up until the extinction in the Holocene, just about 3,000 years ago, as we'll get into. and one of the last of the mammoth species, beginning with the African mammoth in the early Pliocene, and then evolved from the steppe mammoth about 800,000 years ago, which is quite interesting. So the first evidence of these guys were kind of found in like various elephants that have been mentioned in the Bible and things like that. The first woolly mammoth studied by European scientists was in 1728, where they thought these guys were like giant moles. But then it was George Cuvier in 1796 was actually first to identify the woolly mammoth as a new species and not just an elephant, which is quite interesting. And we don't know where the word mammoth actually came from. It may have come from the word behemoth and also means mutt, so it's kind of the mole behemoth, that's kind of what say. But Thomas Jefferson also kind of the word mammoth is used as a noun. And there's been lots of research looking to their evolution and history. So the history of the woolly mammoth, or history of these guys, are proboscideans, so they're clade that contains modern elephants. They existed about 55 million years ago around the Tethys Sea. They lived in Africa. The closest known relatives are the hyraxes, if I'm getting too weird. There's a couple hyraxes coming up in a couple updates, and also the sirens, like dugongs and manatees. The family Elephantidae evolved about 6 million years ago, and this includes modern elephants and mammoths. And they're only distant relatives. And the mastodon, which is mammoth, is only a distant relative. They're separated by about 25 million years of evolution. So the closest living relative to the woolly mammoth is the Asian elephant, or all mammoths is the Asian elephant. So they seem to be separated by about 6 years of evolution. So that's comparable to how much evolution time is separated between us and chimpanzees. So that's quite interesting. While the African elephants diverged from an earlier common ancestor about 8 million years ago, 6 to 8 million years ago. So because there have been so many preserved in permafrost, we have quite a good idea of their genetics and everything, which is really, really cool. So we can kind of know that a little bit about their evolution. And we do have evidence of them hybridizing. We do have evidence of woolly mammoths and steppe mammoths hybridizing as well. And actually just the population of Colombian mammoths, which is another species, may actually be a hybrid of steppe and woolly mammoths, which is really interesting. It's really interesting to read all that genetic stuff. It's so cool. But yeah, we'll talk about the appearance of the woolly mammoth because it's kind of what's characteristic. So the appearance of the woolly mammoth is probably the best known of any extinct animal because of so many preserved specimens. So these guys, fully grown males, get between 2.6 to 3.4 meters tall, so between 8.8 to 11.5 feet, and weigh between 3.9 to 8 tons. So those are the largest males. And this has seemed to be, but on average, they got between 2.8 meters, about 9 feet, and about 4.5 tons in the Siberian populations. It's a little bit between the Siberian and European population. The European population was average a little bigger, so about 3 meters tall at the shoulder, about 10 feet tall, and about 6 tons. Typically, the Siberian population was smaller because potentially it was a lot drier in Beringia at the time that connected North America and Europe. But they did get quite big. They're comparable in size pretty much to African elephants. But actually one of these smaller mammoths, not the smallest, there's like pygmy mammoths that exist, but they're smaller than steppe mammoths and Colombian mammoths, and comparable in size to the modern African elephant, which is quite interesting. And we don't know why they were smaller, probably a little bit more compact, potentially to deal with cooler climates, maybe just a little bit less rich environment they can support being larger. But these guys were on average, as I mentioned, similar in size to male African elephants, especially for the bulls. The average female would have been, we'll have a look at the females. You can see, look at this female here. We've got an albino female. They would have got to about, on average, female would have been about 2.3 meters tall, or about 7 feet tall, and weighed about 2.8 tons in the Siberian population, with the females in the European populations being a little bit bigger, at about, 2.6 meters, or 8 feet tall, and about 4 tons. And a newborn calf, a real cute guy, little like this, would have been born at about 90 kilograms, or 200 pounds, and this is based on comparisons because of modern elephants. So let's have a look at you. I like this one. So you can see the females and the males have different tusks, which is a thing that I really like. So we actually do also have quite a few frozen specimens, so we do know quite a bit about what they look like. So the pelvic girdle, there is, that we can tell, like the males and females. And there are actually a small population on Wrangel Island of dwarf mammoths that were quite small. They got about 6 foot tall. They were not considered small enough to be island dwarfs, but they were smaller than your mainland mammoths, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And unlike a lot of modern elephants, which are tropical species, these guys were obviously cold adapted for the tundras and mammoth steppes of the Ice Age. So they have a lot of interesting adaptations to help them survive in cooler climates. So you can see they get the name woolly mammoths from the thick layer of fur. They also have ears that are far smaller than modern elephants, which actually are only about just over a foot long. So they have ears that's like 38 centimeters across or 15 inches long and 18 to 28 centimeters across. So they're really, really small, so that reduces the risk of heat loss and frostbite. Also, they do have very, very long hair, and they're also thick skin as well. So the skin is no thicker than an elephant, but they do have a thick layer of fat under them that was about 10 centimeters or 3 inches thick. That help keep them warm. And they also have broad flaps of skin under their tails and anus, very similar to modern elephants. But they also, as you can see, got very long coat as we'll get into. And also, they've been shown in cave paintings to have like a big hump, which was potentially have like potentially to store food in. Well, not store food, but store fat. They could survive in leaner times. Cave paintings have shown that these guys also potentially had an upper lobe on their trunk, but it's not considered a thing much anymore. And there's also, as we'll get into, lots of variations within the coat. So in terms of the coat, they're very much similar to other cold adapted animals. They do have like a very long, long coat of guard heads that were very, very long. They got to about 30 centimeters up in the outer parts of the body and reached up to about 90 centimeters in diameter. So these would have been the very, very thick guard heads that protect them from potentially things like dirt and things like that. And then you have the shorter coat underneath that was much shorter. So that was about much softer to actually retain heat. It was about 15 centimeters, I believe. And they likely would have molted during the warmer season, so they would shed their winter coat, get a summer coat, very similar to a lot of other animals as well. And since most mammoth carcasses were actually preserved, potentially only their winter coat is preserved, so modern elephants have much less hair, and this is thought to be for thermoregulation. But in comparison, so most of the specimens of potentially woolly mammoths are in their winter coats, so that would be in their hairiest. We don't have many mammoths in their summer coat, so they potentially weren't quite as hairy in the in the summer, which is quite interesting. But what's really interesting is most preserved mammoth fur is actually they do have a number of like sebaceous glands on their skin that secreted oil, which would have gave them more insulation, also repelled water, and made them a little bit shiny. So lots of animals have that. So these guys would have been covered in kind of oils as well, giving them a shiny mammoth, which is really interesting. And we do have a lot of research looking into woolly mammoth fur, and most of it is considered orange brown, but it's believed to be an artifact of bleaching by being buried. But we do have looked in a lot of research into mammoth's hair color, which is pretty interesting. So a lot of evidence. So this is actually we'll talk about the mod itself a little bit. We actually have a lot of variation within mammoths based on the genes. So we know that we have this kind of typical brownish color. We also know that the brunettes, as you can see, that's the baby brunettes. Brunette mammoth. We also have like a cherry blonde or like a ginger mammoth. So all these variations are based on like different colors based on the genetics. So as we're looking at the genes, especially this big male here is kind of like a lighter brown with a little bit of light to him. So really, really cool. And then you have obviously your albinos and piebald, which are quite common in pretty much all animals with colors. So that's quite interesting. It's really cool that they've looked into the colors and they actually have quite similar variation within their hair color like humans do, which is really cool. So very much like a lot of other elephants as well, they have large tusks, well, with the big male hair. So longest known male tusk was about 4 meters or about 13 feet long, and curved and weighed about 115 kilograms, and was a historic point, with the heaviest tusk being about 121 kilograms. So they got about 125 to 130 kilograms. With males having much bigger tusks, females had smaller, thinner tusks. They're between 1.5 to 1.8 meters long and weighed about 9 kilograms. And in comparison, they're still much bigger than that of an African elephant. The longest tusk of an African bush elephant was about 3.4 meters, so they have a little bit longer well. And you can see they're often actually not this much perfect. They're often like asymmetrical because mammoths will actually use them to kind of dig and things like that, very much like modern elephants, so they can be asymmetrical. They have like a preferred tusk. That as well, they also, little babies also have small, like, milk tusks, as you can kind of see going on here. We'll have a look at the cute little babies. Little milk tusks as well, that are a few centimeters long at 6 months old, and then they replace them after a year later with their permanent tusks. And the tusks actually grew continuously throughout their lives, but of course, obviously, into adulthood, it would start to slow down. There are some mammoths believed to be with small or no tusks, but whether that was variation or just artist license, we don't know. But there's no evidence that female woolly mammoths lack tusks, even though their closest living relative, the Asian elephant, does. Females don't have tusks. And really interesting as well, for their teeth, they have teeth very similar to modern elephants. So it's got very high crown. So these guys were quite well adapted for feeding on grasses, but did eat a lot of browse as well. So very generalist. But because they lived on the steppe habitat, they would have eaten a lot more grasses and things like that, which is quite interesting. And like elephants, they would have had enamels and like teeth that would continuously replace throughout their life. They would get 6 sets, and then they would last for the lifetime individual. And it'd be like a conveyor belt, and kind of like bits breaking off. And then once they get to the last set, they're pretty much dead, which is a little bit sad. Typically, their tusk would grow between 2.5 to 15 centimeters each year, and actually tell a lot about a mammoth's life or an elephant's life by their tusks. There's actually a recent study that looked into the life of a particular mammoth that lived in the Yukon and told her like her family and kind of where she migrated to throughout her life, which is really, really interesting that we can learn so much about an animal that's been dead for thousands of years. But yeah, we're going to keep going talking. I don't want to be too long. So, very similar to modern elephants, they would have lived in, used their tusks and their large size to protect themselves from prehistoric, like wolves and cave hyenas and large felines like Homotherium and cave lions, things like that. Males would have used their tusks to fight each other for females. Their behavior is believed to be based on evidence and speculation, very similar to modern elephants in that regard. And they also had long hairs on the tail that would have been like for fly swatters. We do have quite well preserved. In terms of their societal structure, like modern elephants, they were matriarchal, so there was a top female in their herd, and there would be the females and their young. And they're young, and then once the males reach about 15, they would leave, either live by themselves or live in bachelor groups. And we do have a lot of evidence of this based on trackways as well as basing it on modern elephants. So the probably the most specialized member of the elephant group for the cold. As I mentioned, they've got the hairy fur, really hairy, small eyes and not eyes, small ears and tail to protect from frostbite. But also they have lots of hemoglobin as well adapted to the cold, so it's actually to prevent freezing as well. So they have a lot of those kind of adaptations. And they also had lots of different adaptations for things like fat storage, so better able to store fat. Also had larger kidneys to deal with drier climates as well, since they were living in the dry mammoth steppe, which is quite interesting. And we get into their diets. These guys were very much grazers, most of the time mainly grass and sedges, but they did eat a lot of flowering plants, mosses, and tree matter. They had a varied diet. An adult of 6 tons would probably need to eat about 180 kilograms of food a day and would have foraged for 20 hours a day. And then they probably used the two-fingered tip of their trunk. That's probably what they're very similar to actually to modern, I believe, African elephants, which is interesting. And they probably would actually curl their trunks to grab plants and things like that. So very similar to modern elephants as well. And isotope analysis that these guys are feeding on mainly C3 plants, unlike horse and rhinos, which is interesting. We also found lots of fecal material, and we've actually a pretty good idea of their gut biome. And isotope showed that these guys, this young mammoth that was named Luba, I think I've seen her. There was an expedition that showed off like little baby mammoths. It was really cool. These guys would have been weaned, nursed for at least 3 years and weaned in kind of between 2 to 3 years, which is interesting. And this is later than in modern elephants, which is a little bit interesting as well. And their molars were quite well adapted for those coarse tundra like plants or the enamel steppes, as they typically had higher crowns than the more southern relatives, which is another interesting as well. Lifespan of a mammoth was very similar to modern elephants, probably about 60 years. And we could tell that by looking at the growth rings in their tusks and tell a little bit about their lives. And they often continue growing past adulthood. So typically males stop growing when they're 40 and females stop growing when they're about 25. They have a very similar gestation period to modern elephants, about 22 months, 22 months. And they were typically born in the spring, which is pretty interesting. And we do have lots of evidence of injuries and bone fractures and things like that, and dental problems, which is the biggest killer for mammoths. We do have lots of evidence of that. So these guys had quite a wide range. These guys lived in the mammoth steppe or tundra steppe that expanded through most of Europe, across northern Asia, like Siberia, Russia, and then up into Alaska and Canada during the Ice Age. It was a huge habitat. There was all sorts of really interesting animals like wild horses, bison, Homotherium, cave lions, reindeer, and even woolly rhinos, things like that. A really interesting habitat. But it would have waxed and waned through the Ice Age because of the interglacials, and so the habitat got bigger, smaller, and they had to adapt to deal with that, which is quite interesting. So, in terms of also their relationship with humans, we know that they did exist with them, and also Neanderthals coexisted with these mammoths. Would have likely been very important for them for both as food and probably also probably there's lots of like depicted of them of as well. So there's lots of like art and sculptures of mammoths and bison and also horses that seems they were quite important to their culture. They probably ate them a lot and probably saw them as like a big figure in their habitat because big animal. Humans have like a really interesting relationship with elephants, which is really interesting, and people probably hunted them and used them. For made things out of ivory or scavenged them as well. They potentially made huts. Would have used pretty much everything they could get. They've been butchered by humans, and sadly they went extinct recently. So most woolly mammoths disappeared around the late Pleistocene to mid Holocene with the end of the Ice Age, the Quaternary mass extinction. Whether it was, I've kind of done this to death, whether it was done by humans or climate change or disease or by a combination of all these factors, they most likely, on the mainland, they went extinct between probably about 12,000 years ago, around that time. But being larger animals, because they have a slow reproductive rate, that puts them more at risk of human extinction and changes in the environment. They can't really change and evolve as fast. But there was potentially some small populations that lived up to about 10,000 years ago, even 9,000 years ago, and some small populations in Siberia, as it wasn't like a big extinction. Since they had such a huge range, there were pockets where they could live. But there was also a small population in St. Paul Island and also Wrangel Island that survived on up until about 4,000 years ago. For comparison, this is when we started building the pyramids. So they did live into the Holocene, so they're technically a Holocene species. But most likely, after that, when humans got there, they kind of went extinct around 4,000 years ago. But their kind of main extinction on the mainland was about 12,000 years ago with the rest of the Pleistocene megafauna, which is quite interesting. So they lived in such a huge habitat and had to deal with interglacials all the time. So times where the world was warmer and cooler and warmer and cooler. So they likely were used to the change, but adding humans into the mix most likely threw them off since these guys have such slow reproductive patterns, could have really put them at the risk of extinction. But yeah, it's a debate that's going to go on probably for ages. So we don't, whether it's humans or climate disease or a combination of those factors, we really don't know. I don't feel like going on about it. But we do know of mammoths quite well. We have lots and lots of specimens and lots of fossilized and even frozen specimens. So we do have a lot of their like soft tissue, and people have even eaten them apparently, which is not good. But they've even been found all sorts of really, really preserved specimens, particularly of calves, but some adults as well. So we do have a pretty good idea of what their anatomy was like, which is really, really cool. And this has led to a lot of scientists believing, looking at since they're so well preserved and be able to get quite good DNA samples of them, there have been people talking about trying to revive the woolly mammoth either by cloning or potentially putting mammoth genes in elephants and then reintroducing them back into the well, obviously they'd be kept in captivity first, but reintroducing them back into the Arctic to act as kind of ecosystem engineers to kind of, recreate the mammoth steppe. And there's also a lot of research suggests that mammoths could actually help with climate change, with Pleistocene Park, having large animals stomping down the snow to pack in more, pack down the snow so it creates less of a heat layer and prevents the melting of permafrost. So it's really interesting. There is some talk about it. Some research look into their genes, maybe even putting these genes in elephants to create like a mammothant. But it would be a huge effort technically. I think personally there's much easier animals that could be de-extincted just to perfect the technology before working with super intelligent, long-living animals like mammoths. But anyway, it's still a cool thing. Because they're pregnant for 2 years, takes them about 20 years to reach maturity, and then reintroducing the population is going to take centuries to get a population started. But yeah, I think there's many smaller animals that could be a lot easier to do that with. But anyway, they are still a cool technology, and lots of research is going into it that'll be beneficial for a lot of projects and other de-extinction and genetic rescue projects, which is cool. And yeah, and plus reintroducing them, great for climate change, great for tourism. I'm sure a lot of people would go to Siberia to see a mammoth. Very, very cool. But yeah, they've been also really important in human, culture. Originally, indigenous people of North America used to make bone ivory out of mammoths and, sculptures and things like that. Also, ivory is a big thing, people selling them as well, which is really cool. But yeah, a really awesome mammoth. You can see all the different variation. This one is the cherry rose. This is the blonde ginger mammoth. Albino, tiger, so this is the most common pattern. This is yeah, this is Tundra. Tundra's got the kind of the bottom one here. This is the melanistic. I think this is the step pattern. Yeah, this is step, I think. And this is a big bull. He's 100% really cool. And then we've got a piebald one over here. So yeah, really, really awesome mod. I definitely love the mammoth. And we'll have a look at the babies a little bit, because we've got some really cute little babies. So this is what they look like as newborns. So cute. And with so many baby newborns, sad that the babies died. But we get to learn so much about them. I love seeing like the preserved one. When I went to Australia in 2018, went to see the Mammoth and Macedon expedition, and they had preserved one of the baby calves. I think it was Luba, but yeah, really, really cool to see little babies like that. But yeah, this has been a mod that's been in the making for like 2 years now. Nice to see a good update of that, and I've really wanted to cover this one for ages, so it's really nice to finally get this out to you guys. So, yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.